You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 9th of September 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
As Department of War, we want everything. I don't want to be defense only. We want defense, but we want offense too.
But does offense breed peace, or does it risk more actual war? We'll speak with Bloomberg's Andreas Kloot in Washington, D.C. After that, we'll turn to some more pleasant news from the World Design Congress right here in London. Our own Carlotta Rebello is there for us. And finally,
I am a firm believer that in the next 5 to 10 years, the UK will be one of the biggest wine capitals in the world.
You heard it here first. That's a prediction according to an Italian restaurant owner right here in the UK. All of that on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. We'll start today's show in the United States. Donald Trump's habit of renaming things took on another term last week when out of the Department of Defense became the Department of War. It's a return to the days of World War II and before that. But could something as simple as renaming a department lead to more actual war or less? Well, earlier I spoke with Andreas Kloot, opinion columnist for Bloomberg News in Washington, D.C., and I began by asking whether Trump's latest renaming was intended purely for domestic consumption or as a message for American adversaries.
It is the first. It is purely politics for domestic consumption. You have to make it more clear than that. In another column, I said that basically, and many people have observed, Trump views his entire presidency, already in the first term and wholly in the second term, as essentially reality television. And he is genius, I have to say, at that medium and the constant leaving the ending every episode with a cliffhanger, the creation of suspense. But he is focused. He views policy and politics and his own role in the world as essentially maintaining ratings. And he does things for effect. So the Department of War is a low-hanging fruit. I mean, renaming things is incredibly easy, Chris, right? I mean, you don't have to think through complex policy consequences. So he renames the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. By the way, that's not binding. That's not a thing. It seems tough. And now he renames the Department of Defense into the Department of War. And Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is now the Secretary of War. And they've had both of them, Trump and Hegseth, have this shtick about lethality, the warrior ethos. It's all the domestic cultural wars, fighting against the woke elite. So it is all theater. And no, unfortunately and tragically, there is no sense of strategy. And this is what I keep hearing from every person I interview here in Washington, D.C. And I'm particularly interested in interviewing people who either are Republicans or who were on the National Security Council, in the State Department, in the Pentagon in the first Trump term, or at some point with Trump. In other words, I'm not hearing this from lefties or people like that. But the common denominator is everyone agrees he does not have a strategic, analytical way of approaching world politics. And that is, of course, incredibly dangerous, especially when you're dealing with matters of war and peace.
Well, there is this interesting contradiction, Andreas, because you talk there about the theater of all of this, and at the same time, Donald Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. That is also part of his theater at this point. But is he actually at risk with something like this, playing up these kinds of terms like the Department of War, of risking the actual war that even he probably doesn't want?
I think he is risking war at some point down the line, but not in that way. So, for instance, the name change will have it is purely cosmetic. It is purely reality TV. We can dismiss that as posturing. But of course, you notice he there is no Trump doctrine, no Trump strategy, but there is a style, and I would call it random acts of violence. But the way a bully is violent, when he knows the other person can't hit back. So he just, on the same day he announced that, just sank a boat of 11 drug smugglers. We don't even know if they're drug smugglers. Normally the Coast Guard would pick them up and then give them due process and that sort of thing. But here he sends in the Air Force or naval aircraft, whatever it was, to bomb a boat of 11 people in the Caribbean. Okay, he bombed the Houthis for about a month and moved on. And then, of course, Iran. So it is random violence, not in search of a strategy, but you have to combine that with other strategic defects. He constantly not just alienates, but humiliates allies. Greenland via Denmark. He just withdrew shut down training programs to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the front line to NATO. He treats Australia, Japan, South Korea, all the allies badly, and somehow he keeps treating the dictators really well. He just said something very positive about Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. Okay, he's open to meeting with Kim Jong-un again in North Korea. He, of course, is best buddies with Putin, apparently. So this means we're going back to the world of great power politics, of spheres of influence. You see that he's interested in Greenland, Canada, Panama, and now it has right now a naval buildup in front of Venezuela. He says, our Western Hemisphere is where I play. Putin, you got Eastern Europe. Maybe you get East Asia. The message has been sent long ago, and the other, autocrats have received it, which is now it is a power politics of sphere of influence. Everyone is out for themselves. And in that sort of more subtle way, down the road, there's room for recalculation, miscalculation. It could be over Taiwan, the South China Sea. It could be over something like that. That's what I think raises the risk of war in the long term. And the theater maybe accelerates it. It makes these other dictators go, we can't take him seriously.
Well, you mentioned China there as well, and President Xi Jinping, just a few days before the renaming, himself said that the world faces a choice between peace and war. I mean, a naming like this by Trump a few days later would seem to suggest that America has made its choice. What's your sense that his adversaries, like China, take him seriously, understand this idea of the sphere of influence you're talking about, where these two countries are not going to risk being at actual conflicts?
I think Xi Jinping believes he understands these trends. Trump is so unpredictable. But from Xi Jinping's point of view, this is all fantastic because he has his own theater. He's posing as the leader of the global South. And of course, every time Trump, for instance, defunds the United Nations or exit the World Health Organization or UNESCO or the Human Rights Council and all these things, China steps up its role there. Every time Trump imposes very punitive, stupid tariffs on allies and friend and foe alike, on everyone, China says, oh, look, you can't, reckon with the U.S. anymore. We'll guarantee stability in the trading system. Come to us, even though China has a very rapacious business model. So he's wants to step into the role of a leader. He gets credibility, and simultaneously, she is, of course, rallying what I've called, what many people have called, the axis of upheaval, or whatever you want to call it, between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. So these anti-West, they have nothing in common except that they're anti-US, anti-West. And they're now ganging up. You saw that at the summit last week. They like to send the message in turn to the US as, look, don't mess with any of us too much, because there's now 4 of us. We could open 4 fronts. And I think in all these ways, Xi Jinping says that he's unpredictable. This is chaotic, but China has a lot of problems. Fortunately, it now has this opening that the U.S. has Trump. Maybe we can drive a truck through that hole.
So if China does have an opening here, the other country you mentioned is Russia, of course, the relationship that Trump and Putin have. I am curious if there's a world out there in which Vladimir Putin might actually take Donald Trump's threats, his unpredictableness, seriously and reach peace quicker than he might have otherwise?
I don't think there is that world. I don't see that happening. I think if that were plausible, we would have seen it by now. There's so much speculation over what Putin has on Trump, what their relationship is, what kind of weird googly eyes Trump keeps making at Putin. He keeps confusing the roles of aggressor and victim in the Ukraine war. He's not clear on that. He deeply hates, Trump hates Zelensky for reasons that are like couch issues and others, okay? There is no credibility left in his threats. He could, this is dangerous if he now has to overcompensate, but I'll see it when I believe it. The way to do this would have been to stand with the NATO allies, with the Western allies, and keep supporting, make Ukraine, as Ursula von der Leyen says, a steel porcupine. So there is no credibility in these threats for me, and I do not see this happening.
And Andreas, just finally, what is the mood like on the ground in Washington, D.C. at the moment? Because the other side of all this is Donald Trump's use of the National Guard and preparing to move into other cities in the United States. He's talked about a domestic war. At least that's what he seems to be suggesting it could look like on the ground there.
Ugly and worrying. We had, of course, marches this weekend here in Washington, D.C. over this. I see the National Guard. They're friendly. They're nice guys and gals. I saw them, they've been photographed with leaf blowers and stuff, which is funny because Hegseth keeps saying how they're all about the warrior ethos and lethality. And, but there was, as you know, crime is down in Washington, D.C. So there was no crime emergency. This is a pattern. He declares emergencies that don't exist in order to have a strongman show of force. And of course, now he has sent the National Guard into LA, and now he wants to send them into maybe other cities. Baltimore has been talked about, in Chicago. And then he came out with that very weird Truth Social, where he has himself in the style of Apocalypse Now, where instead of Vietnam burning behind him, Chicago's burning, and he says Chicago's about to find out why it's now called the Department of War. This is back to what we started with, the reality TV aspect of theater. The audiences are not necessarily foreign, they're domestic. He cares about his domestic enemies, as he defines them, which is anybody who's not on his side. And this is, of course, the most worrying thing, which when you're here, you feel on the ground. I mean, both the division and the toxicity, which has been there for years, as you know, you used to feel it. It's hard for Americans to talk to each other in any civilized way. And Trump is, of course, loving that as a reality TV star.
Thank you very much, Andreas. That was Bloomberg's Andreas Kloot in Washington, D.C. Now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Israel has ordered a complete evacuation of Gaza City, home to around 1 million Palestinians, ahead of its planned military takeover. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned civilians to evacuate, saying a major offensive is coming if Hamas does not release the last hostages. Many residents say they have nowhere safe to go and plan to stay despite the danger. Nepal's Prime Minister has resigned after mass protests over corruption and a social media ban. Police gunfire during the unrest killed at least 19 people and injured hundreds. The government has now lifted the ban, imposed a curfew, and launched an investigation into the deaths. Google says it will blur South Korea's sensitive security sites and remove their exact coordinates from Google Maps and Google Earth. The move follows a government request aimed at preventing access to precise military locations. South Korean law already restricts foreigners from using high-resolution maps for security reasons. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. To the World Design Congress now. Consider the Olympics of design, and it's taking place right here in London. Monocle Radio's executive producer, Carlotta Rebello, is there for us and joins us now. Carlotta, I understand you're joining from the lunch break.
Hi, Chris. Yes, nearly the lunch break. They are setting up, so you might hear some of the rattling behind me. But I am indeed at the World Design Congress, which has returned to London finally after 50 years. It is taking place at the Barbican Centre. It makes only sense that it happens in one of the city's brutalist icons. And for the first time as well, the theme of the event is Design for the Planet. So a big focus on the power that design has in improving the world around us and bettering people's lives. Now, to give you some numbers, because I know you're a fan of stats, Chris, most attendees ever in this edition of the Congress since it began in 1959. We're talking about 1,200 people in attendance here in person and similar numbers joining the live stream online. 77 countries are represented here with people from all over the world, including from Kenya, quite a big delegation from Kenya here as well. And in total, over today and tomorrow, we'll be hearing from 160 speakers from 22 countries. How's that for numbers?
That is a lot of numbers and a lot of people. What else are they going to be talking about? I mean, you gave this topic, Design for the Planet. Dig down a little bit more for us on what exactly that means. What kind of... I understand you saw some case studies this morning.
Absolutely. So it really is honing in on this idea that we are at a catalytic moment for the global design community. And that's everyone from business makers, policymakers, academics, designers, us, journalists. And it really is this mission to learn and work better on how design can improve our world. This morning, we heard 3 incredible case studies. One of them is about functional design and how a simple change to a stove in Kenya has actually improved the quality of life for many, many people. So we are talking here about a project in rural communities in Kenya where people traditionally cook with open fires that not only provide safety, but then also the fuel that is added to those stoves to cook food has mosquito repellent. So it's actually helping decrease the number of infections, malaria infections. So a really simple example of how by changing functional design, the lives of many have been impacted. Another example was this designer that works with biology and bacteria in design. And this is to create garments from bacteria, but also materials. And they discovered that by using these microbes and applying them to sand, the sand would then turn into stone. So therefore, you're creating stone to build buildings, create lamps, create structures, create tables by simply adding bacteria to it in a very natural process. So those were just some of the case studies that we heard this morning, and really inspiring to, when you think about design, to think that a lot of times it is about innovation, and in the age of technology, how some of these answers actually are about going back to the basics and rethinking how we do things. One of the speakers on stage said this sentence that really stuck with me, and it's this idea of how sometimes the future involves rediscovering old materials through the lens of this new technology. And I think that really has applied to what we've heard so far.
And Carlotta, the way you described there, some of the panels, some of the things being introduced, this is also the Olympics of design, if I understand you correctly, which does mean there are awards. There must be awards. Who's winning?
Yes, there are indeed awards, and we've had one of the big ones this morning, and this is the World Design Medal 2025, which was given to Dieter Rams. Now, many listeners might recognize his work from the Vitsu shelving units or functional design like Braun's very first orange juicer, electric orange juicer, or some incredible radio design. And, you know, Dieter Rams really is a guiding principle for many of the modern designers, because he came up with his 10 principles of design, which revolve around function, beauty, simplicity, and form. And a lot of the practitioners that we follow and admire guide themselves by the principles that Dieter Rams came up with. So it was a real treat to have that here. He, of course, could not be present because of his advanced age, but someone was here representing his that works very closely to the betterment of utilitarian design in our day-to-day lives.
Carlotta, I'm sure you want to grab some of that lunch that is setting up behind you. But before we let you go, just curious, what else are you looking forward to this afternoon there?
Yes. So now at lunch, actually, I'm going to be very fortunate to be part of a group that's joining a smaller group for lunch at the Barbican Conservatory. And as part of the group heading for that lunch, there will be the 25 trailblazers. So yes, you did mention these are the Olympics of design, and these are basically the 25 designers to watch. And it'll be a real chance for, a more intimate discussion with them to hear about the work that they're doing and how, green design is good design. How they are approaching design briefs being given by companies and so forth. Then in the afternoon, we're going to this idea of hive sessions. And these are smaller workshops where you get to hear from the likes of Zaha Hadid architects, Foster and Partners, etc., who will be engaging with other practitioners to tell them about some of the projects they're working on and how more and more clients are not just asking for, but expecting a sustainability element to the pitches and briefs that they're being given to. So it's going to be quite a hands-on afternoon, and I'm looking forward to it.
Just finally, Carlotta, where it's taking place, the Barbican Conservatory, I understand, is going to be closing for renovations. So it must be quite special to be there.
Absolutely. Not just the Barbican Conservatory, but right now I'm right outside the main hall. The level above me also will be closed very soon. And this is part of the Barbican's big overhaul as it approaches its anniversary in 2030. It is rural of the public spaces and also the outside by the big water feature and the cafe that a lot of people know the Barbican for. And it's going to go through this amazing renovation work to, first of all, making it more accessible. When the building was built, accessibility requirements are not the same as today, but also to make sure that people know that these public areas are indeed public and allow for more performances to happen there, for more events to happen there, and for the general public to reclaim the Barbican as a public piazza for them.
The World Design Congress happening in a place itself, being redesigned, that being the Barbican. Carlotta Rebello of Monocle, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, the UK's hospitality sector has spent the last 5 years spinning plates. After the pandemic shuttered innumerable restaurants and bars, the industry now faces new challenges, from staffing shortages to rising costs. But this year, closures have diminished, and industry experts are tapping new outlets and crafting creative solutions to keep the doors open, keep staff happy and bellies full. Monocle's Anita Riota spoke to one such professional. Sebastiano Alessandroni is general manager of London-based Italian restaurant Polentina and CEO of Vault. She began by asking him about a curious post-Brexit contradiction. As unemployment appears to be rising, restaurants are still struggling to fill jobs.
There is definitely a post-Brexit trend. Let's say in hospitality, when we talk about hospitality, Italians, Greeks, the French, the Spanish, it's very custom for them to go into hospitality jobs because I think culturally wise, it's very much embedded in their culture and they like doing these kind of jobs. It's very difficult nowadays to find students from uni who want to do this job because it's long hours, it's extremely difficult. And now the thing that we're seeing is that due to the laws and Brexit, so many young professionals from the Mediterranean areas are going back home. Because it's very difficult to live in London, it's quite expensive, the jobs are not as well paid, so the financial aspect as well of the kind of availability that restaurants have in terms of capital has been significantly decreased. So it's very difficult to hire, professional staff that know what they're doing or have been in this industry a long time. So what tends to happen is you hire part-timers who don't really believe in the industry that they're in, they're just doing it as a part-time job. Everything sort of trickles from there and standards drop and all of that. And so post-Brexit has definitely left its mark on the London hospitality industry for sure.
The other sort of force I wanted to ask you about is the pandemic. What is the sentiment for those of you working in hospitality? Are we returning to some sort of normal? Is it just a completely new frontier?
I do not want to catastrophize. But at this moment, it is very, very difficult. We've seen it this year. So many amazing establishments have closed. And so many great establishments I know are closing because it's just so difficult cost-wise with the rising costs of everything. Food costs are completely out of control. It is so difficult now for people who do want to work in this industry to actually get a foothold and go back to how it used to be, because it's not going to go back to how it used to be, or at least it won't go back to how it used to be for a long time. The costs are different. The availability that you have to pay your staff, good staff as well, is completely different. And many people just don't see it as a career because it's very long hours and it's not exactly always paid the right amount of money that you think you should be getting.
We've outlined a lot of difficulties facing the sector. In some of the restaurants and wine bars that you've worked in, have you seen strategies that are solutions or are working well to address some of the issues?
I think that, well, I can only speak from what I have experienced, but the concept of upselling, many restaurants have a concept of, let's sell them the most expensive bottle. But you have to understand that these people who come to buy these expensive bottles are going to buy that expensive bottle and they're not going to get anything else. I'd rather have a table of 6 buy 8 bottles, but 8 bottles that they really want to drink, and they seem to appreciate the fact that you're not constantly trying to upsell them something. What do you want to drink? This is the right price. Oh, give me that budget. And you could also say, but this one costs £5 less, but you're going to enjoy it more. And that's going to give you that customer retention, customer loyalty, and people are going to come back because they say, well, he's not trying to just take my money. He's actually trying to give me an experience as to what's going on. So that's how I tend to do it fundamentally.
To pivot slightly, you've also been a sommelier at a slew of London restaurants and wine bars. It seems the UK's role in the wine world is growing. Is that the case? Can you sort of tell us about that?
100%. I am a firm believer that in the next 5 to 10 years, unfortunately for us Italians, the UK will be one of the biggest wine capitals in the world. Climate-wise, you can already see it with the sparkling wines that they're doing, so they're already getting that notoriety that they want. I personally believe that they are going to do great things within the next couple of years. The only issues that we have is that, again, the prices are quite high. You know, they're charging between £16-18 cost for some bottles, which are, you know, you can get that in maybe Franciacorta in Italy, or you can get them in Champagne in France, but I mean, charging that sort of bottle. But again, it comes down to pricing. Everything is so expensive now. To create something so good, you have to put up your prices.
And across all of our programs, we are discussing the impact technology is going to have on their industry. How do you, maybe it might not be an obvious link to people. You think wine, technology don't have a happy medium, but how does increased reliance on technology, what do you think that means for the wine industry going forward? I mean,
for both when you're trying to pick a wine, and for both when we're talking about the actual harvesting of the wine, it's going to be something essential. I think AI, for example, we're already seeing the first type of companies that are coming in and they're using AI to help you select wines, to help you choose wine. We see blockchain that help you with provenance, that help you with sustainability, with traceability. And we're also seeing a lot of things more so in America where agriculture now is becoming almost fully technologically able. So tractors driving themselves and the drones flying pesticides all over the field. Wow. It's actually a surreal world to live in. The company that me and my partners are developing, which is called Volt, we're trying to bring together this technological aspect, making people understand that the digitalization of wine is not going to be something scary. You have to put something social to it. I feel that many companies are trying to make it purely digital. At Volt, we're trying to make it a little bit more, yes, it's digital, it's going to help you, it's going to educate you, but it's also a great thing to bring you together.
Sebastiano Alessandroni there of the Italian restaurant Polentina, in conversation with Monocle's Anita Riota. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Laura Kramer and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye and thanks for listening.